Peace World, you are now tuned in to the Administrator Presents and all the way live hiphop.com. I am your host, it's your big brother Righteous, and today's guest is, has been an influence for me because I probably wouldn't be here doing what I do, doing what I love without him. At the same time, he's so many attributes: DJ, host, broadcaster, music promoter, producer, educator, and probably best known for popularizing hip-hop here in Toronto, Canada. I have Ron Nelson on the line. Peace, 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 peace. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How you doing, big brother?
Peace, not a word to play, as they say. People forgot what that means, but still, Peace!
Indeed.
What's up, everyone?
Indeed.
Glad to be here, man. Big yourself up, man.
Indeed.
The original Lyrical Force in the house.
Indeed. Remembers the name. True indeed. And you gave me my first...
Little do they know.
You gave me my first radio spin because as we were speaking, the whole Clinton Marshall, I'm going to get into it. The whole Clinton Marshall, you did something where you had people call in and talk about it, and I did a freestyle or I did a rap about violence, and then you played it on the air. And the one time I missed the Fantastic Voyage program show, you aired it, and I came to school on Monday, and everybody was like, Lyrical, you was on the radio. I heard you on, and I was like, and nobody recorded it. So, but I have to say thank you. I still have to say thank you because that was my first time on the radio, and that definitely helped get the name Lyrical Force out there. So,
you're very welcome, man. You just played a part,
Indeed.
Yeah, those are some special times, though, man. Come on now, those were the times when an MC could call in on the radio, and if he sounded nice, then I'd say, hey, want to go live, just like that, and then you're live. And in this case, it was I guess a conscious movement because people were trying to be thuggies with their lyrical styles back then. So I was trying to keep it conscious. Somebody got murdered. So if you got a freestyle that can, kind of play the proper lyrical part, then kick it. So you had that, So big yourself up, man.
Indeed. Well, thank you. And, thank you for everything. I mean, if I don't say it now, I don't know when I'll be able to say it. So now is the best time publicly. Thank you for all you've done for hip hop in Toronto. I'm glad to see, I think it was at the Scarborough Town Center, the Star, you got a star, or was it the Walk of Fame, or what was it that you got recently?
Yeah, it was star in the Scarborough Walk of Fame at Scarborough Town Center, which, it's a great honor, man. So it's like getting your flowers when you're live instead of when you're not alive. So it's a nice tribute, man.
Indeed, and that's why this interview here is so important, and I'm so excited about it. Just because I wouldn't say I was there in Toronto at the beginning, but I definitely was a concert hall goer, and I learned a lot about the history of Toronto because as I don't remember what year it was, maybe 89, I could be wrong, I did an interview with you at Apache Studios. I still remember it clearly too. That was my first time to Apache Studios, and I remember interviewing you, and some of the stuff that I learned about how you got started in the Fantastic Voyage program. And we're talking a long time ago, so a lot of it I don't remember. I don't know where the interview is. I don't even recall if I recorded it or anything. However, what I do recall is when it got started. If correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I remember.
Go back to where you said what you do recall, because you're kind of zoning out there.
Oh, okay. So what I do recall is how it sort of got started. So if I'm correct me if I'm wrong. When you started the Fantastic Voyage program, individuals had to go to a movie theater to listen to it. I mean, like the range wasn't that big, and everyone would go.
Lots of stories there, man. The signal was very weak. I don't even think in the very beginning, it was 1983 when I went to Ryerson and applied to CKLN the first day, but it wasn't called CKLN back then. It was, I forget what it was called, but the signal was very, very, very weak. You could get it on cable, and if you lived downtown, then you could probably get it within a certain radius, but it leaked out into the community areas that we're familiar with. But people had to literally park their cars across railroad tracks and, put their coat hangers onto their boom blasters and, doing all kinds of wiring tricks to get a little bit of the signal coming through. And that meant everything to them. It didn't matter how they got it, because the key was, back then, they couldn't get it from anywhere else. It was on the ground, and it was new, and it was fresh, and commercial radio did not even recognize it at the time, and New York was too far away. So just hearing a little bit of, remember, there's no Instagram or Facebook, or there's no online movement going on at that time. The only way you could hear new, fresh, exciting music is to go out to a party, or go to a record store, or try and drive to New York. And we always came back with cassette tapes of all the fresh stuff, and everybody would want a piece of those cassettes. But yeah, when you had a position like myself, which was a privileged position, to take the streets to the radio, it kind of made me into like a little bit of a celebrity, which I didn't know at the time. But yeah, man, CKLN was, in the beginning, a station that you had to go through a lot of pain to listen to, but it was worth it. All the pain. It was the first umbrella, so you know what I mean. It was worth it.
Indeed. I'll tell you a story that I haven't really told anyone. Well, I mean, people who know me kind of would know who was around me at the time, and friends from back then. So I used to have it where I had to have the coat hanger sticking out the window. So the window was open. So my neighbors would be upset because I was playing 88.1 every Saturday. So they knew every Saturday they're going to hear hip hop. And at that time, Be Cool lived on my street. So I wasn't really a MC or a rapper. I knew how to rap, but I was never considered. So he would see me breakdancing in front of my house. And I was introduced to him as Be Cool. And then later on, I remember the Get Loose crew coming out with a record. And I was like, oh, that, because I heard that he rhymed, but I didn't know who was who. So that was my beginnings to starting to go to the concert hall, but it was knowing who he was. And he was...
Yeah, you remind me of the Be Cool days when I talked to you, because, you're kind of different than a lot of other rappers yourself, right, as an artist. And that whole hip house thing was something that Toronto didn't really love and support, but, we were trying it back in those days, Be Cool as well, right? And he ended up, he won some, I think he was acclaimed for his hit song that he had there, but I don't remember the name of it. But Be Cool was one of those guys that was kind of outcasted a little bit because he dared to explore a different style, you know what I mean? That wasn't the New York style, and if you tried touching house in any way, shape, or form, people kind of looked over their shoulder at you a little bit without endorsing what you were doing. But he did what he did, and back in those days, man, it was a great time for experimentation and shit like that. So yeah, man, big up Be Cool and yourself and everyone who tried.
Indeed. And going back to the origins now, Fantastic Voyage program was yourself, and you was Mixmaster Ron. That was your name, Mixmaster Ron, and then there was Outlaw Ed. And so how did Sugar C fit in? Now, was Sugar C you had the reality record that started off the show, and then was he the person that says hip hop now on your radio? Was that him, his voice, or whose voice was that?
No, it was a guy I got from Ryerson, a white guy who had a really good voice, and he sounded like a news announcer and stuff like that. So I had those people, going to school there while doing the radio show and stuff like that, and we were doing a lot of reel-to-reel splicing with the splicing tape and the razor blade and the editing block and stuff like that. So and back stuff, we put stuff in something called carts. It wasn't cassette tape or anything. Radio station played commercials on these things called carts. So I actually, I guess, incorporated some of what I was doing in school with what I was doing on the radio, and he was an example of that. So Yeah, he was part of the intro, but no, it wasn't Sugar C. Sugar C became my official show MC when, he introduced himself to me with Dex the Mac, and he was a fan of the music, but he was also a recording artist, and he had his own vibe. He was right in the Run DMC vibe. Him and Dex Mac reminded me of Run DMC, and they put a record out called "What Is This World Coming To," and they went to New York and went into an expensive, let's call it, recording studio, and did it right, and then put the record out, and it was ahead of its time. Now, unfortunately, I still talk to Sugar C, and he can't find a single copy of that record, and that was one of the earliest great records in Canadian hip-hop history. So if anybody out there can find that, the record label is a Red Label, and it sounds like Hard Times, and it's like that. It was that kind of vibe on the song. And Sugar C, again, had that kind of MC voice, that deep baritone voice, which mattered back in '83. If you had a deep voice, then you were considered a qualified rapper. That was all part of the tone of the music at that point in time. You want to hear the bass in the MC so that it blows the speakers when you're on the dance floor and stuff like that. So Sugar C was one of those guys, you put him in front of a mic, you got to turn the mic volume down because he had that baritone voice. And me and him used to kind of emulate what was going on in New York, in New York. So our, I guess, duty was to come up with jingles that would give the show some character, make it hip-hop. And we didn't always have access to artists to do jingles because hardly any artists were coming in town. So we had to create our own jingles and use our imagination and try to be original and creative in coming up with these little jingles and rhymes that would go in between the show. And he was funny, so he put a lot of little, things about rice and peas and chicken and curry goat and things like that, and a little Jamaican flavor inside of the American twang, and he became a favorite on the show, basically an institution in the Fantastic Voice program.
Yeah, because I think I recall the record. It was early on though. For me, I was kind of maybe too young to kind of recognize or realize at that time. But I do recall somewhat. I just don't, we're talking, it was 85, maybe 86.
Yeah,
And
probably 485. And again, back then it was barren land in Canada. You put out a record as an independent, and it's like there's nowhere to go with it. There's nobody who understands the music and what you're trying to do, and nobody really opening doors for you and giving you a chance. You got to shop it in New York, but very little love and support in Canada. So I played the record on CKLN. But I don't remember anyone else playing it, and like I said, it was mastered properly, it was produced properly, it was a great record. Like, what is this world coming to? I don't know. That's kind of the hook in the song, but
yeah, I somewhat remember it. I've been looking for the record. Haven't, I put out the word myself, so anybody tuned in, let us know. Let me know. We want that record.
The artist who made the record doesn't have a single copy. Very sad. I'm sad about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you put out a record in 1980. It was called Breakdown. I'm actually trying to look for it. I'm gonna bug you for a copy. Hopefully you have a MP3 copy. But I think that there's some online for sale. Believe it or not.
So you and I disagree on this, man, because I said 1988 just now. That was B-Boy Destruction. You're going way back to 1980. I'm talking about Curtis Blow. You flip over to the B side of a song called The Breaks, and maybe 100 records were made of this track. I went under the name of Ronnie O.
Yes.
So for all you ages out there, yeah, I put out a record in 1980, you suckers. Some of you weren't even born in 1980. But listen, man, that record was a squeaky sounding, low quality bootleg rap record. This DJ who taught me how to mix, his name was Jeff Mattini. He worked at this club, I think it was called TG's, which was in Mississauga, which was far, far at the time back in those days. But he basically was the first guy who taught me how to mix with two 1200s, and he was a disco DJ, and he was one of those white people that got totally fascinated with the rap movement. He played in a disco club that was packed every weekend, and Rapper's Delight was a big hit at the time, and he wanted more of it, but there wasn't any more of it. You know, there was nothing that had that commercial poppy flavor, and I think Curtis Blow was the next person who came close, because his song The Breaks was really historically, you know, a mover and a shaker in terms of songs trying to penetrate the commercial rap movement. It wasn't even hip-hop at the time, it was rap, which came right after disco, so there's disco elements in the song. So I was like the only black guy that he knew that could rap, and I couldn't really rap that good, but I'd be rapping when we're driving in the car to the club, because sometimes I'd go there and assist him and stuff like that, even though I was probably underage at the time, but still he got me in. But, you know, he heard me rapping a few times, and then he's like, hey, Ron, man, I'm going to put out a record, I'm going to bring you in the studio, and he didn't know anything about rap, nor did I. I didn't know anything about making a record. I just went with the vibe, you know, and his studio turned out to be a cassette recorder in his living room, and he had a microphone and the instrumental of Curtis Blow's song. So he's like, rap over it, and I think I did that song in one take. So I actually have probably a few copies still in my vinyl collection here, but I'm not proud of that record at all.
I recall hearing that record, and I recall you flowing.
Curtis Blow. People, the name is Ronnie. Oh, that sounds starts. I sound so whack on there, but hey, man, you know,
well,
historically it was.
I appreciate it. I mean, you look at I'm not sure if you're familiar, and if I want to ask if you ever crossed paths with Mr. Q, and because my understanding he put out 4 records in '79, so he was an American cat that came to Toronto, and with Monica's, I believe on Eglinton, it was a record store before, or a record label, and
Yeah, they had the record store in the basement.
yeah,
I bought all of my 12 inches from there, tons of 12-inch reggae records, and Junior and Ken were people that I did, you know, business with, and, you know, when I bought Mr. Q's records, because I have probably 3 of them on that yellow jacket, and I didn't know he had anything to do with Canada at the time. I just thought he was a cool sounding MC, because he was rapping over funk songs like bounce, rock, skate, and, you know, songs that were remixed a little bit to fit the flavor of what he was doing. I think it was like a live band that he probably used, but they were a very funky band. People back then didn't know how to make things sound hip-hop-ish, so they were very R&B-ish and outdated, but he kind of had a nice sound. So WBLK was playing his tracks again without giving any credit to the Canadian aspect of it, and it became one of those things you could play in a house party when, you know, you know, you're just grooving and kind of bopping your head, and it's, you know, you're in the basement and people are still coming in, and it's a nice vibe. You know, he's I think, a good MC. He passed away. So.
Yes, it was last year he passed away, so I didn't get a chance to speak to him. He was on the list too. So this is another reason why this is important, because this is hip hop history that we're speaking about, and you know, you are the man that, you know, was there from the beginning, as far as what I see, as far as when it comes to 79, 80, that's when the first records were being made. So
Well, I'll say this though, that I was not the man. I don't know. I give credit to people who come from hip hop right from when they were given birth. You know, they grew up in the ghetto or whatever. They had obstacles growing up in life, so it shaped their character. Their environment shaped their character. But I was nobody before I got on the radio. You know, I was a DJ, very enthused and stuff like that, but I did not know the significant part that I would play, because I was a lover of all kinds of music. I wasn't loyal to just black music. I loved, like, even today, music is like my melting pot. You know, I love all aspects of it, not just one aspect of it. But the only difference, and this is where, you know, I have to give credit to the people who were there before.
mm-hmm.
You know, I was the first person that took it to the radio, and and champion black music from a street point of view, not keeping it conservative and shit like that. So that's why I get credit, and that's when I became who people think I am. You know, the Ron Nelson who was like the Godfather or whatever they call me. I just find it ironic though that before I was just like, you know, just a regular kid not knowing, you know, where it was going or what my purpose was supposed to be. But the radio changes people, man. When you get on there back in those days, and you're black, you know what I mean, and you're a conscious black person, and you care about black people, and you're a spotter for talent. And I guess the one thing I think that separated me from other broadcasters even today is that, you know, I have an open door policy. I'm so excited to advance black people that when I see talent, I want to promote it, you know, and I want to expose it. And the radio is something you can be very selfish with and only play yourself and play dub plates that feature yourself and promote yourself and the parties that you're doing. And you can be very, you know, linear. But I didn't have that selfish kind of aspect to my personality. I let people in the door, and that's why people got on the radio and got their first exposure and their first interviews or played their first cassettes, etc. Because other people had closed doors, and other people didn't even have doors in 1983. This was one of the only doors. Before CHRY, before CIUT, you know, they weren't making impact when I don't know, CHRY came after. I'm not sure if CIUT was there before CKLN, but even if it was, it didn't have the same impact. So I think that's just a lesson for even people who, you know, do radio shows today. If you can give people some love, man, give them a chance, break the rules a little bit and play a demo, you know, do what you have to do to get permission to do it. But it means everything to people in Canada who are trying, because Canada is still this place that has a lot of blockades, you know, when it comes to people trying to progress from a Afrocentric point of view. So we need all the love and support we can get. So support each other, you know, just like how the Chinese support each other, and they, you know, they stick to doing business within their own community. You know, like, you know, we need to give ourselves some love in our own community as well, man. And cheat a little bit if you have to, but you need the love. That's all I'm saying.
Indeed, no, you're absolutely right, and that's part of the reason why I do what I do. At the same time, I know you're modest when it comes to it. I mean, there are different times I would say the same thing to you over the years, and you'd be like, if it wasn't me, somebody else would have came. And you know, I know that there was like Sunshine, Kilowatt, Maceo. I know that these were sounds that was around, you know, running Toronto. I was probably too young. I think the first party I was at was the Party Center. I don't know how I got in. I was 12 years old, and you know, I had a lot of cousins that would come up from New York to visit.
You were 12, G? You were 12?
I was 12 in the Party Center, but I don't know who was DJing that night. It could have been Sunshine. That was my first event. You know what I mean? And then I guess
that was hardcore though, man. The Party Center was close to Regent Park.
Indeed.
And I don't mean to cut you, but there was one time I played at the Party Center in the early 80s. And, you know, back then I was a Fantastic Voyage disc jockey service, me and my Trinidad partner, Ian. And I'll tell you how it went, man. Like, when they wanted reggae, because we didn't understand the politics, you know, and the demographics at that time. We were playing funk and dance music, you know, Prince, you know, Rick James, stuff like that. The stuff BLK was playing, you know, some of the stuff that was crossing over, that included rap. So that's what we promoted if you look at the flyers. But in this era now, the West Indian populace is growing inside Toronto, and they gather in certain areas, and one of the most hardcore areas was Regent Park. So people used to walk the Party Center from Regent Park. So there we are playing our music. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. They want to hear reggae. The only reggae we have is like, I don't know, One Draw and some Bob Marley and maybe one or two other popular songs at the time. and they wanted more after we ran out of that. Next thing you know, a broomstick comes flying towards the DJs, like a friggin' broom, man. They threw a broom at us in the middle of our set. It
What
was
the
like a
heck?
wake-up call. It's like, whoa, where the hell are we?
Wow. I didn't
Yeah,
know.
man,
I
Regent
know.
Park was rough back then, but
I know
it was
there's
a learning experience.
different stories and whatnot, and over the years, I mean, I've witnessed different things that you've gone through. But yeah, that was the first time you ran a broomstick. I could only imagine, right?
Well, this was before the radio show, so that was one of the jams we're excited about too. We're like, oh, we're playing at Party Center, because that's where Maceo played, and DOC, and Kilowatt, and Sunshine, and we'd never played there before. I don't know who hired us or why, but we were the wrong DJs for the part. And like I said, yeah, man, a broomstick back in the early days.
Indeed, indeed. So when it came to, what was your very first concert? What year, and what was your very first concert? Was it yeah? Who did you bring up for the very first time?
The first show I was involved in bringing up was DJ Jazzy J at the Breakdance Theater in Regent Park, of all places. And again, with a little naivety, so there's probably only about 100 people there, maybe 150, because people didn't have money in Regent Park. They didn't want to. Hip-hop was just very hard to promote at the time. Rap music was hard to promote, but the people there were tolerant because Jazzy J, the same artist that does It's Yours, he's also a DJ. He drove from New York by himself to play this gig, and we were shocked when this DJ came in the door at like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, saying, "Yo, man, I'm here," And that was me and my boy Rob that did that, and Rob never did another show after that. But I had people at the time who were, I guess, the blueprint of why I continued to promote, because after experiencing that event, they basically seduced me into continuing to promote. I had plans to go to Rochester and study radio broadcasting and recording studio engineering. That's what I had planned to do, and these guys kept bringing me in to, championing these shows, because I was the guy in the radio show, so it was a good formula. So that's kind of what happened. I ended up doing it, myself independently, and it became Ron Nelson Productions, the concert promotions aspect of my life, where for years the radio show was a good start for the hungry youths of Toronto who loved the little 3 hours that they got every Saturday afternoon. It was 2 hours at the beginning, but after that they became very entitled and basically demanded, not asked, but they told me now that I had to bring up these artists because they wanted to see them live, and they didn't ask me if I had the qualification to do it. There was nobody else that they could talk to at the time, because nobody else was representing their music that had any sense of community, really, or any plan to see the future of the music. And I became a sucker for, people being thirsty and hungry. Like, I want to feed them, So I started promoting rather awkwardly and just continued doing it because the people wanted it and they needed it, and there was nobody else doing it. There are other guys doing it, like Sunshine and stuff like that. And for anybody who knows Tony D, big him up. But Tony D was one of those guys that, was very inconsistent. Sometimes artists would show up, sometimes they wouldn't. And other promoters had the same problem. They would try and do it right, but a lot of times it wasn't done right. And I was like one of the first people now who had some sense of credibility. It's like they could find out where I lived. They know where to find me. I couldn't promote with a name that wasn't recognizable, so you can't get your money back afterwards. I had to stand up to the name Ron Nelson Productions when I did a show. So I ended up having a 99% track record in terms of not screwing up. So the trust was what really embedded me as a credible promoter, because of the streak of not being like the rest of them and being honest and, you know, delivering what you promise. You know what I mean? You don't just talk about it, you end up being about it. And being a promoter is one of those scary things because, you know, you can have a sold out show and say, I'm going to make $1 million. And then the person doesn't get a work permit or something happens and the venue is not available and you can't reschedule it in time. There's nothing guaranteed until that artist gets on the plane and flies back to his city where he came from in the first place. So a lot of fretting, a lot of gray hairs as a result of doing concerts for decades. Yeah.
Indeed. I mean, you brought some of the best concerts I've ever seen. You know, Salt and Pepper. It was, who was it? Salt and Pepper, Heavy D, and MC Shan.
That was a dope show, man. That's one of my favorites, man. Heavy D was the bomb. I mean, I liked everybody, but the sound quality that night inside the concert hall was booming. It was as perfect as you could make it, and you know. Big of Heavy D and the boys, but they were Salt and Pepper were pissed off at me because I had to save money, so I flew them to Buffalo and personally drove them back into the city, and they were giving me attitude for the entire drive. Yo, man, why you be flying Heavy D direct to Toronto? You be flying us to Buffalo? And they were not happy. They were quite bitchy, actually. I shouldn't have been the promoter. I should have hired a driver. But yeah, you know, we try to save money in every aspect back then, and they put it aside when they performed, and they were very womanist when they performed as well. They picked up the ladies in the house, so they're very empowerment to the females kind of thing, which was a good thing for them to do. And Spinderella was great on the turntables. So memorable. I missed a lot of my shows because I'm the concert promoter and I couldn't always watch them, right? So it's good to have a little memories of this and that.
Indeed. And how did MC Shan get there that night? Was it the same? Did you pick him up, or was he flown in? And he had a live band, if I recollect right, or did he have a live band with him, or he had somebody playing?
No, he didn't have a live band, but he insisted on having a drummer who I had to supply the drum kit for with the skins, and I remember I had to pay for them because the guy ruined them somehow, but it was like an experiment for them, you know, so it was hip-hop, turntables, rapping, but they tried to incorporate one guy who played drums as a backdrop.
Okay.
So that was kind of awkward. And Shan was a man at the time. Now, I believe I flew him directly into the city as well. I don't remember for a fact. And I remember I didn't really like his show that much afterwards. For some reason, I was disappointed. I don't know why. He was not much of a performer. He was a big guy on the stage. Like, he was huger than I imagined. When he's walking around and, you know, he looks really skinny in all the pictures and graphics I've seen and stuff like that. He had some height to him and everything, but he just wasn't a flamboyant performer. He was just kind of, you know, average, but loved his music, you know, the bridge, it's like historical, you know.
Indeed. I mean, I was going through those records from a little while ago. I did a show on the Juice Crew. And the influence between Toronto and the whole Bridge Wars, because MC Force or K Force, he had the South Bronx is Over, and then Rumble on the record, the Beat Factory record, other MCs, he took a shot at the Juice Crew, because the Juice Crew sound like. So, you know, there was sides. There was definitely sides in Toronto, and you know. To me, you ran with BDP, right? You know, and we're gonna get into, you know, the self-destruction and B-boy destruction, because, you know, I recall a conversation with you. It was at Keisha's house. Keisha had a barbecue, and that's when I remember the conversation. And, you know, I really feel that self-destruction came from B-boy destruction. And I found a video. You're gonna hate the internet. I found a video of you saying it. So I'm gonna let you expand on it.
Oh, damn. I look forward to seeing that.
I'll send you the video, but there's a YouTube video with you saying it. And it was funny because the way you said it on the video is how you said it at Keisha's barbecue. To me.
Wow.
So
Well, you know what? It's all right though, because I did sample BDP for B-Boy Destruction. So, you know, but me and them are cool, man. Like I said, me and Scott and Chris and everyone, you know, D-Nice there. I mean, we hung out when they were in the city, and so it's almost like a family thing. We felt, you know, like we felt something was going to happen with the music, and we're on the edge of it, you know, and they were a good symbol of it. But, you know, at one point, all those guys were up here in Toronto, and they had no money. They were broke and stuff, and it was a privilege that, you know, when they needed, I think Ivan from Beat Factory ran out of money, and he didn't have no more money for the hotel for those guys. So after a few days, I think they were up here also producing Mishi Me as well. And after a few days, Ivan's like, Ron, is there anything you can help us with? Because we need to put them up somewhere. So I was all right, well, they can maybe stay at my house, you know, and I lived with my mom at the time up at Brimley and Steeles, and that's where they ended up staying for a few days, you know, and my mom was like the host. She had to make food for them every day, you know, and just my mom and dad were like the people running the hotel now, except it was my house, you know. So it was kind of cool. We got to spend some time with them. I got to kind of see a little bit of New York because, you know, Red Alert and people like that would call sometimes, yo, man, let me talk to you, and I'm like, yo, Red Alert, oh, you know, this is exciting for me at the same time, you know. So,
indeed, I remember I came to your show once. Just, you know, I was like a little fly on the wall, and I recall Red Alert. He was there for 2 days. He was at your show, and he was at Dave's Dance Music on the Sunday. And I was just like, just how you was at, I was like, that's Red. You know, I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know what to say to him. You know what I mean? He's standing right in front of me, so I could only imagine because, you know, as a youngin at that time, we looked up to what y'all was doing, and it was a big. I don't think people realize how huge it was. I mean, they may not have had money and all that, but you know, from my peers at the time, like Boogie Down Productions, Mishi Me, Rumbling Strong, and they're coming out with a record, and it was huge. Like, the streets was talking, and it was, you know, we had this idea that, okay, this is going to be the record, right? And not understanding the industry, because we were like, why isn't it playing on this station? Why is it only on college radio? We didn't understand the barriers. If you didn't understand the business, at that time you couldn't understand the barriers because elements of style.
Nobody really understood the business back then. No, nobody. Like Ivan Berry turned out to be the first person in our scene that understood the business. And he was the manager of Beat Factory, so he had everybody at his disposal because nobody understood the business. Everybody went to Ivan, including myself. You know, and Ivan's a fancy talker, so yeah, man, sure, man, no problem, you know? Because, you know, he's got his publishing, pet publishing, right? So anything you do with Ivan, he's going to take 50% of the publishing. So Ivan went from a guy who was into street beat and R&B and funk, and that was his baby, managing those guys. And when he saw hip-hop, his eyes just opened up wide, man. He just saw money, 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 money. And guess what? His intuition was correct because he used some of that experience to, you know, get Dream Warrior signed overseas. And I think they're still historically one of the best-selling albums in Canadian hip-hop history. So
indeed. I'm going to ask you a question right now that I actually have on my list.
Hey, hold on. Let me just put this out, too. One of the best records in Canadian hip-hop history, but check the record because I got 2 tracks on there that I produced and a couple of jingles on there, too, that I produced as well. So
indeed. One of them was it the Multiverse?
Yeah, Boys Through the Multiverse, and the other one was Journey On. And then they got a couple of silly jingles and stuff, but yeah.
Indeed, and I remember I was at Spectrum when you're like, y'all don't know how big this group is about to be. They just got signed. They're going to Europe. I recall you saying that, and sure enough, that's what happened. Now, the reason I want to go to this album, Do you remember Shakim Shabazz? Do you
Of course.
recall? And Flavor God. Did he ever work at Apache Studio? Because this is a question that I know in Canada for the Nation of Gods and Earths. They're gonna want to know this because I was there because that was my man. He was supposed to bring me with him.
He came in with
Flavor Goddesses.
DJ Power and Thrust and a couple of guys, I believe, who did a song called The Boom Seth. And
Oh no, you talking about Kaleem Shabazz. I'm talking about Shakim Shabazz. So I know who Kaleem Shabazz. That was a dope song. I actually have it. But Shakim Shabazz on the back of Dream Warriors album, they gave him a shout out. So he was when you had Monster Jam at Spectrum. I can't recall what year that was, and he had the Flavor Goddesses. And no disrespect to the brother, but it was a poor performance at at Monster Jam. It was a poor performance. He had a shine. So I just wanted to know if he did record at Apache Studios because it was.
I don't know.
L.A. Love was working with him.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if he worked with LA Love, then he performed in the basement of my house because Beat Factory's recording studios was right beside my studio. The two studios sat side by side in up at Apache Trail there. So
Okay.
At least I can claim that. The Dream Warriors album was made in my house.
Indeed.
I was there listening to it as it was made. So it's kind of a cool thing, man.
Indeed. But yeah, I know Kaleem Shabazz, the Boom Set song, that was classic. I remember when you played it, and I don't know if it was you played it or if it was X. Indeed.
I found that song on my dad tape the other day, and I was listening to it, and it sounds still up to date to this time. Like it was ahead of its time. Like
Indeed.
Radio wouldn't touch it back then because of the content, but it's actually one of the last times I worked with Power in my studio. DJ Power is living in New York now and working with Bobby Connors, and he's become one of the top DJs in the States now. But, he had his movement for a long time, and him and Motion and Tom and the whole family, his brother and stuff, they'd be going at it with a plan, like a real plan, and it's good to see good things happen to good people. So DJ Power, big up out there, we miss you, man. But he was producing, and he'd come into my studio, and he'd be one of those producers where all I would have to do is engineer. I wouldn't have to produce. Everybody else that came in, they needed help. So, Ron, you got some ideas? This, all right, this, that, and that. But all I had to do is take his instruction, and bang, they pull that song off in a quick maybe 3 hours and had it mixed down. And yeah, man, for all who don't know that song, man, tell your boys who do their community radio shows to play it.
Indeed. I think I'm gonna run it today on the show. So I have it, and I played it. From time to time I put it in and out of heavy rotation. Whatever mood I feel. So yeah, definitely it's gonna be one of the joints today because it's all Canadian today here on the Administrator Presents. However,
nice.
And I think it was You Bad. You Bad was his group with Motion and I can't remember what his brother's name was. It Tyson?
I think so.
I don't know what his rap name was, if it was a different rap name, and later on they did stuff with Nasty Howie T or Nasty.
I didn't know that because he was a junior at the time. They didn't have him rapping much at the time. It was mostly Power at the controls, and he'd bring different people in at different times.
Indeed.
A lot of talent I didn't know about. Power was all over the place with different artists trying different people doing different things, but they'd come in and he wouldn't see them again for a while, So money was an issue, It costs, $25 an hour for studio time at the time I was charging. So you do 4 hours, it's $100, and, when you're broke, man, $100 is hard to come up with, right? And then you got to buy food, and I remember working with people like Blast and his Jane Finch boys and stuff, man. They'd go over to the Niceys, and they'd buy the rice because it was the cheapest thing to buy, and you'd see all the artists that you'd bring in, four guys just eating rice because they couldn't afford anything else. The rice was the cheapest thing there, but guess what? It filled you up, man, and it can make you go back in the studio with some energy because you got something in your stomach, you know. So
indeed. And is the nice? Do you know if the Nices is still there? I know for a fact.
Man, that whole plaza is torn down, guys.
What? Because
the whole plaza is gone.
2014, 2015. I don't know if it was open, but the sign was still there.
Nah, I think they're building condos there or something.
Wow.
But
Yeah, because
if you got pictures of that place, you know, preserve them because people are gonna want to remember what that little plaza looked like. A lot of drugs were sold there, man. A lot of guns were moving through that place, man. It was right across from Chester Lee, and Chester Lee was always making the news. It was one of those bad areas that was right across the street from a good area. You know what I mean? Like a total conflict of interest, but yeah.
Indeed. No, I remember that neighborhood. So, you know, around the time, there's names that I'm going to bring up that we obviously know, but, you know, my listeners may not know. So, obviously, Be Cool, Shadow, Get Loose Crew, Gel, I don't know what Stanley went by, but Self Defense, Vision Super Sounds, before Maestro was Vision Super Sound, he was Melody MC. It's funny, he's Melody MC, but his sister's Mel Boogie. So
a lot of people don't know that, eh?
Indeed. And then Mikey Likey, we're speaking about it because to me he was my dude as beatbox. But yeah, I guess Stanley was it Mighty Mouth Rock was Stanley, if I recall correct. And then there's Easy Rock and Devour. I was speaking with DRK the other day, and I recall being, and I don't remember what year this was, but it was because you had New York against Toronto. So I'm kind of gonna be rambling all over the place because I'm so excited. But these were some of the names. But I recall two specific battles. It was either Easy Rock and Devour against DC, and you know Cutmaster DC. I was like, okay, Brooklyn's in the house because I'm a Brooklyn dude. And the basketball fell when he went to do his basketball scratch.
You remember that, eh? Do you remember the cane too? The crutch? Scratch with the crutch too. Like when you have a broken leg, you have to walk with that crutch.
Yeah, I sort of remember. It was a long time ago, but I recall. I think the main thing is that we looked at it where, okay, it's Cutmaster DC. And when we seen that, it was just, for me, I got laughed at because I was just like, Brooklyn, da-da-da. And all my friends obviously was either from JA that moved to Toronto or just Canadian. So I got laughed at and I was just like, I couldn't really bring up the name Cutmaster DC after that. And, you know, to see that, it was amazing. And, you know, I wish there was, I don't know if there's video of it because I think DRK might have some snippets of it from what he was saying. So you might want to get at him for that. He might have video of that. And then Maestro battling Marvelous. And what I recall him saying is you should be delivering my flyers. And for those who don't know who Marvelous is, it was Cash Money's MC.
Yeah,
and
out of Philly. Yeah.
Indeed. So that's what I remember for New York against Toronto. But my first concert, and I don't know if that was, I might get dates confused. But
I get them confused too, don't worry.
It was the KRS-One. That was the first show, and I was telling you earlier, that's what I recall. That, you know, I left my house. I did the thing where I had pillows under my bed like I went to sleep, and I snuck out to go to the concert hall, and I'm getting home like, all I remember, I left the concert hall sometime after 3 a.m. Don't recall what time, but I had to see KRS-One, and I still have the cassette tape that I had South Bronx. So we had the Walkmans with the cassette tape, and I listened to that for hours. I just recall, and you mixed it. You on that tape. What did you mix it with? I'm gonna have to give you the tape. It was one of the best mixes to this date that you've done that I liked. It was Run DMC and somebody else. You know what? I'm gonna look for that tape, and I'm gonna give you that tape. It was to this date. That
Man, you brought up a lot of names, though, man. That's like, last time I heard somebody mention DJ Devour and Easy Rock. I mean, these guys are white guys, right? Both of those DJs.
indeed.
And technically, they're one of the first dope white hip hop DJs on the early scene who don't get enough credit to this day. But they brought in new scratch styles, new elements that, you know, people evolved from that afterwards. Now those are maybe old styles, but back then the reason I gave them exposure is because they were friggin' good. They were cutting and scratching, and it was part of the whole fascination of Caucasians coming into the industry who appeared to have as much talent as we did, you know, and we thought up until that time that they were more outsiders, these white kids, you know, that we didn't treat them very good when they came into our events and stuff like that. There was a little racism exercise on our parts where, you know, a lot of white people did not feel comfortable inside of our black environments, whether it was at a hall or a jam or a party. So if you go back to old school, you think about it, use your eyes now, close your eyes and imagine where you were and tell me how many white people were in the room. You know, it was almost an exclusively black thing in the beginning. It was black people and, you know, maybe Spanish as well, but dark skin. But people like, you know, Devour and Easy Rock, I just want to give some credit, you know, and even producers like Alex Greggs, who was in my Battle of the Producers. I remember, you know, he's one of my the most established Canadian producers who's worked with people like Michael Jackson. But when he was a kid and he entered that battle, I had to escort him because, you know, niggas were acting up. No better way to put it, you know. So they didn't like to see a white guy coming inside there. I had to take him from the back of the Opera House all the way to the front, and the Opera House had 1,100 people in there that night, the most packed I'd ever seen it. And on the way there, people were jeering at him and pushing him and elbowing him, and, you know, the only reason why was because he's a white guy. So I was this personal escort, and I can personally attest to the fact that, you know, it was hard for those people to put their foot inside the business and get a sense of comfort. And it's all different now because, you know, they were the first but not the last. Now the business has tons of white people in it that are as talented and has proven their talent, whether they're a DJ or an MC or a producer. You know, it's not about the color of your skin anymore. That's not where your credibility comes from. You know, you just have to be real, but there's more ways to be real now than being born or raised in the ghetto or being shaped by your environment. You know, there's a lot more doors in that weren't open before.
Indeed, and I could attest to that because Alex Greggs was the engineer and he was one of my early producers. This is before, you know, everybody, right? So when he lived Woodbine and Danforth area, I can't remember I know the street, I know the house, and I remember we always like his mom looks like the lady in Terminator. He used to get mad. He used to get angry because dudes was be like, "Yo, your mom is sexy, bro." And but it was me, him, Glenn, and then there was Iggy and Joseph, and I don't know if you recall Worries, but he later on became Dino. But everyone used to call him Dino. You did play his record. He had a song called Bogus Lovers that we put out, but you played it on Reggae Mania, but that was later. But yeah, it was nice to see him, and there was a lot of stuff because we lost touch, him and I lost touch. But when I hear all these stories after the fact, I'm like, damn, you know, I could definitely say I'm proud of Alex, you know, but I could definitely say he was a real one because he was around a lot of heads that was real while he was going through that. So I remember the beat battle. I was there at the club. I didn't remember that happening. I didn't know that was 92.
Those are facts, man. Those are facts. He'll tell you. He'll verify it.
Yeah, I'm assuming that was like between 92 and 94.
Yeah, I gotta check my flyers, man. I got all my flyers. I have to reference them.
I'm pretty sure it was between 92 and 94. I'm absolutely sure. I don't think it was 94. It would have probably been 92 or 93. Because '94, that's when I started doing concerts, and then after my little taste and seeing what you had to go through, I was like, yeah, this ain't for me. I lost too much money.
For real.
Yep. So
It's tough, man. It's your duty, though. You just got to do it.
indeed,
They let somebody else go through what you go through after, and the cycle just keeps repeating itself. We have a lot of music enthusiasts here who sometimes it's not about the money, it's about the love for the music, and you just want to bring somebody here because you want to make people happy. They want to see them.
indeed. One of the other concerts that I recall I was supposed to go to New York and then to Jamaica, and then I heard you announce it. Public Enemy, Boxing Day, and I was like, yeah, I ain't going. So I stayed the winter to see. And I remember Dudley. I don't know if you recall Dudley, Triple X.
Yeah, man.
We was all we came separately, but we was outside the station. We were trying to get in, but the doors was locked. And we met them coming out. We met Public Enemy coming out, and to this day, I guess Professor Griff remembers me because we had a conversation, and then we was at the front, and I'll recall, and Isaiah Tricky, we were all at the front of the stage, and I remember Chuck D, sometimes when you rhyme, you spit, and I had a friend, he was in and out of hip hop, but he was a big Public Enemy, and he's like, Chuck D spit on me, and he's showing us, and we're like, dude, it was just, it was one of those moments. But yeah, those are the type of concerts, and going back to what you're saying, when it comes to the whole black and white thing, I recall that, and I'll never forget it. Professor Griff said, "Don't sell drugs to the other man. Don't sell drugs to the brother man. Sell it to the other man. Who's the other man?" And everybody was going, white people. And you seen everybody in there that was with somebody white just kind of separate themselves. It was very, very tense moment. I don't know if you recall that, but I recall that specifically.
I wouldn't have seen that, no.
Yeah,
But
so
that's interesting.
yeah, so that would be the time where the majority of individuals that was going to the concert hall were predominantly black. But if you was white, then you would have to be, especially when it came to skills. I guess the comparison would be Eminem these days, right? You would have to have some sort of skills. But there was people that stood out that got the respect.
You know what the irony is? Not to cut you, but the irony is that I brought Public Enemy here 4 times, and if it wasn't the first show, then it was the second show. That the only reason I made money is because of white people. If there was 1,000 people there, let's say, I'd say 850 of them were Caucasian white. Kids I'd never seen before. I never promoted to them. It was Now Magazine, maybe I bought ads there, but I promoted to black people, and something had changed about the music, and that was the first sign of it, where, white people now were engrossed in hip-hop. It was their culture as much as ours, except they had more money. So they saw the concert as something not only very affordable, but I'll tell you that at the end of that night, I got a $5,000 check, and it was a white guy that looked like a roadie, long hair, black t-shirt. He's like, "Hey, are you Ron Nelson?" And I go, "Yeah, why?" So he's like, "Here," and he hands me his check, and I'm like, "Wow, what's this for?" He goes, "T-shirts, man."
Yeah.
So can you imagine if I got $5,000? How much money they made off T-shirts? And I'll tell you, every white kid that came into the concert hall, before they went to the front of the stage to stand in their position, they would buy a T-shirt, whatever, $20.
I think that was the second time. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the first time. It was packed. I know the concert hall was packed because I was there. I was there for all of them, because then there was another time. I believe it was with Run DMC and EPMD, and then there was so there was a few times that I recall, but I know the very first one was the Boxing Day. Don't remember the year. I actually did an article about it.
I think it was 1986, and Rebel Without a Pause was doing really well, and that had this kind of nasty sound. As a DJ, it was my number 1 song, but it hadn't crossed commercial barriers. But I kept pushing that song. It's like this backwards siren kind of thing, and it was like the bug sound in the song, man, and it just made me loved the group even more. And I was in the, following Farrakhan at the time. The Public Enemy got to me because I became a conscious brother myself, and I was playing, instead of playing hip hop for certain parts of my radio show, I'd be playing these Farrakhan cassettes where he's talking about black empowerment and stuff like that, and talking about Jewish people and black people and all this stuff, and that was very kind of dangerous radio for me, but it was, again, me getting absorbed in the whole Public Enemy movement and the whole conscious movement, which didn't last a very long time because there weren't a lot of Public Enemies that followed, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, that was a different time, man. That was a different time, man. But yeah, it was probably the second show, going back to what we were talking about, mm-hmm. because like I said, I was so happy that I was able to bring that group here. I think it was 1987, actually. I said 86 before, but it was 87. I was so happy to have brought Public Enemy here, because it was very hard to get concerts at the time and deal with. I think that was my first big concert that I ever did in terms of a commercial flavor, that I didn't even know how good the timing was, because the media, people like Much Music and like I said, Now Magazine, they wanted to co-present the show. I think one of, if not the first show, then the second show, they actually put the group on their front cover in a, with the right timing, that the concert was coming afterwards. So yeah, I don't think I brought any other group up here 4 times, so big up PE, man. Chuck is still my boy. I think Chuck is 62 years old now, and his last record, I think, came out 2 years ago or something close to it. So I'd like to, still hear what he's got to say musically and look forward to more stuff coming up from him.
Well, I'll give you a bit of news. My boy, he's actually my favorite Canadian rapper. You might not have heard of him, but you'll hear of him now. His name is S. He's been consistent. ES. It's pronounced S. I'll put you on to him. And to me, he's been consistent since the from 2005 till now. And Chuck D, his favorite record this year. He announced it. I'll forward it to you on Instagram. The Come Up Story, and I'm glad because I had something to do with the album. So to see Chuck D say that about an artist from here, and I'm affiliated with him, it's his full circle. So I could announce it, and it's his. He publicly said this is his favorite song by a Canadian MC for 2022. So the Come Up Story. So you know what? I'll probably end up playing that today too. So just that we're speaking on it.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, man. When you take a conscious road, you're taking the hard road. People can take the highway. You decided to get a machete and cut through the friggin' jungle. That's what you're doing, because there's never been a great market for conscious hip hop. There's been a market, but there's never been a great market. So when you do it, you kind of, ostracize yourself a little bit, and you're voluntarily doing what comes from your heart. But if it's about making money for you or being a star and all that ish, then sometimes you gotta, think about how you're gonna move. Why are you doing what you're doing? If it's for the money and the fame and the glory, then it's gonna be. It's not that you won't make it, but your level of difficulty. Think of it like a video game. You're choosing extreme as your level of difficulty, where someone else will put out a song about a girl and fall in love, and you'll be hearing them on the radio, and it's your neighbor who's not even as talented as you. So big up all the conscious artists who've tried, right, from Public Enemy and BDP, and artists like those who gave it a shot.
Indeed. And I learned that from you early on, because I was always one of those MCs that I always had to have something conscious to be conscious, and you kind of.
Yeah, you got caught up, man. You got caught up in the whole thing. I think you're wearing a medallion and shit back in those days.
Indeed. I was known for that.
You were wearing one. Is that memory correct?
Indeed. I had from the early the late 80s, I put up all the gold. I had the cameo and all of that too, and then I just kind of put it all up. And
So let me ask you something. And would you say that as a result of doing that, you were misunderstood and a little isolated, or did some people kind of turn a blind eye to you because they didn't understand why you were who you were at the time?
I would say yes, because I was coming into my own. So for me, I was, trying to be a Nation of Islam type cat, and I wasn't really, and goes back to the individual I was saying, Shakim Shabazz, and then obviously, Kaleem Shabazz. And, when it comes to the Nation of God's on Earth, I had family who was part of that. And so I also went through, maybe you could say, an identity crisis because from Lyrical Force, I never put out a record as Lyrical Force. I put out a record as Shorty Groove. So people kind of didn't realize. So I kind of pigeonholed myself in a different way. And then when I was working with Too Rude, it was Eric Ebanks. And then later on, I came to myself and, for how many decades now, whatever, it's just been Righteous, right? And that's basically it.
Three names. You've been out as three different people so far.
Indeed. So,
Okay.
But now it's me who it is. And I'm comfortable with it because I know who I am. So it was me coming into my own, and maybe it was more or less.
Are you a conscious artist? Are you labeling yourself?
Nah, not even. I'm hip hop. I'm me. You see what I'm saying? So.
All right, I'm just checking. I
Oh
know
yeah.
you're interviewing me, but I'm here just to see where you stand.
It's when it comes to hip hop, a lot of people, especially because I like going back into the history and making sure, the culture aspect. And I always like substance. I still like substance, and I always will put a little something into it, but not necessarily. It doesn't have to be strictly about, okay, the upliftment of my people, right? That's always going to be there. However, at the same time, there's an individual I came across the other day. I guess he called himself Lima Beans or something else. And I'll send it to you. He had this record he put out, this little freestyle about, I got Beyonce's number and never called her back. But a lot of that, there's no balance in hip hop. So sometimes you need some Slick Rick and you need some Public Enemy. And, with my records, I try and balance both. So for me, my next record is about relationships. And that's, how is it me being conscious? What is being conscious? What is it being gangster? I'm hip hop. So I could wear AC/DC shirt, I'm still hip hop. You see what I'm saying? When I drive, I don't listen to hip hop. I listen to funk and soul and, reggae and that sort of thing. However, my first love of music that got me to where I am is hip hop. I love writing. I love MCing. That'll always be a part of me. It's for the love, but it'll never be for the money. So I don't ever see myself becoming a superstar, but this is something that I'll be doing till the day I die. I just want to make sure that when you hear a song from Righteous, you get something from it. So that's basically how I would explain. But I seen somebody do a write up on my last release, and it's like, this is such a great effort from a conscious rapper. I was just like, so just with the name, yeah, maybe I picked, but this is me. This is how I've always been, right? So from the first time you played, you aired me to now. So, but it is a difficult road, So I would definitely say that. And I think it's going 30 years now. How long has it been since you put out B-Boy Destruction?
Oh, that was 88. So do the math.
So 25 years.
That's 30 something years ago.
So, 35 years?
98, 108, 18, and we're in 23, so that's another 22, so that's 34 years ago.
Okay, so 35.
That's in one of my songs. I said it 35 years ago I wrote these rhymes. Hip-hop was plagued by violent times, and that's because my record's coming out in 23, so if I had said those lyrics and released them this year, I would have to say 34 years ago.
Indeed. Well, I seen Daddy O. It was either on Twitter or IG, and this was in the past 2 days. he said that there's going to be a self-destruction 35th anniversary redo. So I might as well just ask, will there be a B-Boy Destruction redo? That's all I'm saying, with some prominent MCs. I'm just putting it out there because it is hip hop history and it's hip hop history month. So this is like the right.
We got next year to do that. I mean, it's not a secret, but there's going to be a remix of B-Boy Destruction on my upcoming album 40 Years Too Late, and I produced the remix, and it's, I guess, I don't know, when I put out a record in 1988, I asked Ivan Berry to help me. Even though I had my own studio, I had an idea. Wait a second, no, this was before I had my own studio, because I remember driving to Pickering to Richard Rodwell's studio, Maximum 60, to record the track. And, you know, on the highway going there, I was rapping my heart out, and then I see this car pull up beside me. We're each going, 120 on the highway, but I look over and it's Ivan with a bunch of his guys, and they're looking at me and laughing. And that was just a memory I'll never forget. So I went to Beat Factory, and Beat Factory is a stingy organization, man. I will say Ivan is not cheap, but he's just classic. So he's like, yeah, he got his engineer to produce the record. So I don't know what the relationship between him and Richard was, but the engineer that I work with wanted to get me in and out of there as quickly as possible, and I didn't get the love that you would get today when you go in a studio and you have somebody who's producing your vocals or editing your material. So anything I said was fine in that studio session. Nobody said, Ron, lower your tone, or your song is too long. It's almost 6 minutes. Like, I guess because I was the man or whatever, people assumed that I knew what I was doing, but I'd never put a record out before. And so even though I appreciate the fact that, Ivan didn't charge me for studio time, which probably means that the engineer working with me wasn't getting paid for his time, at least not immediately, but in the end they got, they got paid by publishing, right? So they took most of the publishing on the record between Ivan and Richard and whoever. And I will say Richard, Maximum 60, is a very talented producer. He comes from R&B. He's really good with keyboards. He can do anything you want him to do on the spot. So I'm like, give me some sirens. And he created that siren out. And it was like, we're really in a BDP at the time. So the kicks and snares you hear in there is like, I don't know if we took them from the BDP records, but if you listen to the song, it's styled, the patterns are very much like Boogie Down Productions from back in the days. And as for sampling, I had some Tears for Fears in there. I didn't think about the consequences of sampling commercial material. I don't know to this day how Ivan cleared those samples, but I've never gotten a phone call about me using that sample legally. So again, I assumed that because he had his lawyer and whatever, that somehow that sample was cleared. The part that goes, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
You don't hear him say, come on, but just, I'm talking to you. And the B-Boys getting blown away, like that was, again, BDP. And the woman reading the news in the beginning, she was a woman that I was dating, but she's passed away now. But
oh, I'm sorry to hear.
She had nothing to do with hip-hop whatsoever. She was just a girl that, I was dating and stuff. And yeah, it was a record that I really look forward to fixing, because that wasn't the best of me. And when I listen to the record now, I'm glad that people give it some credit, but it's very faulty in terms of something that was good for its time. Like, hardly anybody was putting a record out at the time. That was the most fascinating thing to me, is that I looked around me as a radio DJ who'd never released a record, and I had all these MCs who were so dope, and I could count on one hand the amount of them that would put out a record that entire year. People are buying clothes, man, and whatever, cars, but they did not have the confidence in themselves to play the game. So the only reason I put out the record was because I was being harassed by the Jane and Finch gang and the Regent Park posse and the Flemington Park posse. When I say harassed, it's because I was the one putting on all the jams during this time, and everybody from the ghetto would come, and there would be issues because Jane and Finch was warring with Regent, let's say, or when I say warring, it's like whatever, they didn't like each other for whatever reason, so sometimes there would be issues as a result of it. But when it comes to music, because they couldn't get it anywhere else, they would try and behave themselves, stick to their own corners, so to speak, because there was no other choice. If you wanted to feed yourself with underground music, you had to come to one of my jams at the time. So it became very organized. I'd be putting on events, and even the security would sometimes not be trustable because they're the ones that open the back door and 25 people rush in, and there goes the security for the people, because who knows if they had knives or any. People really didn't have guns in my jams, but we'd collect knives at the door. Like at the end of a jam, there'd be like 8 knives, and we'd have to take them off people. At one point, they would have this little thing where they'd bang down the door, and the security guy eventually would try and peek through it, and then somebody would just grab it and pull it open, and then there'd be another 5 guys whose jobs was to throw rocks inside the door. Rocks. Okay, and this is like some Palestinian shit, man. The security guy would end up abandoning his position, and then there'd be like a military movement of a gang of people who would just invade the jam, and everyone inside the jam would see a rush of people come in, but the lights are low and dark, and they can't do anything about it. Once they get in the jam now, they just want to party.
Mm-hmm.
They want to hear their reggae and their underground music and stuff, but sometimes there's tension because you have to walk by your Pop and Patty in Sarasota. So you have to walk by the Jane and Finch guys that are sitting there leaning against the wall, drinking their pop, because there's no alcohol, thank God, at these jams, so it didn't make people absolutely crazy. So every event was troublesome to me because I had a vision for hip-hop moving into the future and to be a progressive movement in Canada. So the whole point of B-Boy Destruction was, look, if you mess with the whole scene and you continue to bring violence inside of it, then we're going to be moving backwards instead of forwards. But right now it's good because the whole scene is beautiful. And, of course, the last inspiration was, the community center event where Clinton Marshall got killed. And that wasn't my promotion, but it didn't matter. I was a DJ on the event, but because, again, I'm whatever, the only person who could bring this thing to some kind of public fashion, in my conscience, people were calling me the next day saying, did you hear what happened? Did you hear what happened? And the whole thing broke my heart that some innocent kid got chased down and beaten to death with a baseball bat. And I didn't know who Clinton Marshall was, but when I put the record out, it was part of a movement where, at the radio show, I had his pastor come down, and I think I had his mom down, and we raised money for that family and gave it to them. I basically turned the radio show into a healing experience because I was so moved by it, and it was community radio. You could do that, right? And I did that because it hurt me to see that people it still hurts me to this day when I hear about violence inside of our community. So I'm still conscious to this day, but I had to dedicate the record to Clinton Marshall, and the timing was weird too because Scott LaRock would be murdered as well, and that's just part of the whole movement, man. He did those jingles for me where he's like, yo, Ron, man, let's go to a concert hall and pick up some freaks. I didn't understand how jiggy that word freaks was at the time. When he did that jingle, it was years later that we would start using the word in a way that he used it back then. So Yeah, man, there's a lot of history there, but yeah, if there's going to be a remix of Self Destruction involving a whole bunch of MCs, I think that's cool. But B-Boy Destruction is something, hopefully, that when they hear the remix, other Toronto MCs will, let me in the door, so to speak, and let me in the circle and propose doing something like that. Because right now, it's like I'm an outsider, like they don't. It's a whole different aspect of our interview, but the transformation from everything that I've done over 40 years to now trying to put out music myself is a whole other level of things that I want to do to complete my legacy, so to speak. But they gotta let me in that circle though one day, man. People say people my age don't rap, they retire, but I say aim, shoot, fire.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I mean, you definitely in my circle, and you definitely got the support here in allthewaylivehip-hop.com. I can tell you that, because if there was there wouldn't. My show is basically tailored after your show, so your influences. This is your show. You know what I mean? So from my intro to, I mean, it's shorter. I'm from 1 till 3, but
you don't have an outlaw Ed on your show.
I do not. You know what I mean? I have guests from time to time, and little co-hosts. I had somebody with the whole Juice Crew thing that I was doing and trying to do Toronto, and show how Toronto, and obviously your name was brought up, Rumble and Force, and definitely when it comes to B-Boy Destruction, it was definitely an influence to not just me, to a lot of people. And you look at Self-Destruction and what it came, and I really see that history needs to come out more, because it will definitely open the eyes, because a lot of the youth don't understand what was happening. And when I tell them, or even when I tell them, so when I was talking to Black Poet, and I told him, let's say, for example, the what was the song? South Bronx is over. He couldn't believe it. When I tell people in my interviews, and I'm like, well, you need to hear B-Boy Destruction, right? Like, these are in interviews, and they're like, they don't know, right? So imagine, and this is outside of Canada, and when I speak to the youth, they don't know. So I try and kind of put it into every, yeah. Because
they disguise it as edutainment.
Indeed,
because you'll get a bit of both.
Yeah, because then they're more influenced, and like, well, did you know they're more inspired, because I didn't know that history existed. Because a lot of times, and I'm not taking anything away from Maestro, but a lot of times people would think it starts from Maestro or Mishi, and they don't realize there was a history. So even before 79, before those 45 or 46 records that was made, because people just think of Rapper's Delight or King Tim III, but didn't realize that there was dozens of records made in 79. What was happening before? There was a history before that, right? What was the history? And when you learn that history and how things came to be, you are more influenced to do what you're going to do, right? And you might stick to it.
You said 45. Have you actually researched to find out how many records came out that were under the rap category before 79?
Well, I don't know about before 79, but in 79, on my personal count is 45 or 46. There could be more. I don't know, but I personally counted 44, 46, around that range. That I personally counted, that came out in 1979.
That's interesting.
Right? But people tend to...
Grandmaster Flash was given an opportunity to make his first record.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a mistake, but he said, why would anybody want to hear this on a record?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's making these records up live when he's cutting back and forth and extending breakbeats and stuff like that, and giving people the entertainment that would become hip-hop later on down the line, because he's looping basically live with two turntables. But that was, Flash started probably when 76, 77, something like that. So that was the early era where there were a handful of experimental records put out. They're hard to find because they're the rap didn't have an identity yet. It was just about to formulate. You're still talking about a disco era.
Yes. And then, there's the argument of different individuals, the Last Poets, Pigmeat Markham, because when you listen to Pigmeat Markham, he was rapping. There's you can't tell me he wasn't
I
rapping.
think Cosmic Crash Group is one of those early groups too.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember their album covers and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, there's people who were rapping that, you can call it rapping if you want. There's early traces of rap, but even poetry, you can go back to, Africanism if you want to say what the earliest traces of rap were. You can go back to the rodeo, and those fast talking people who sell stuff what are they called again?
Oh, the auctions. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's rhymes in nursery rhymes that goes back years and years. We don't even know who wrote them. Muhammad Ali can get credit for being one of our earliest poets as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, like all that shit, man.
Yep,
the history.
Indeed. So there's a lot of influences there, and it would just come down to when it
comes down to the number one influential b-boy of all b-boys that was responsible for the biggest shift in the formulation of hip-hop. The one person who can say that I'm standing at the top. There may be other people close, but I'm standing at the top. Mr. James Brown.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. A lot of
He
people.
was the first b-boy that I recognize. He is the first b-boy in hip-hop.
I mean,
and all the ingredients of what is defined as b-boyism.
All those records that people were sampling in the what we call, I guess, the golden era, were all James Brown records. Everything from Public Enemy to Eric B. and Rakim to whoever, it was all James Brown. And indeed, and that was gonna bring me to my other thing, because you have some classic interviews. There's one that I want to get that you may have. You might not like it, but to me, it's to this day my favorite interview. But there was Eric B. and Rakim. I remember that interview, and I believe it's actually online. That interview that you did with Eric B. and Rakim.
I don't remember it. What was so great about it?
I think you were very fascinated because he had this aura about him. And
when they're in front of your eyes, I mean, they look just like they did on their album covers. Eric B had those big giant gold chains on around his neck, like they were playing the part right down to the T. It's not like they're gonna go home and change, And Rakim was just so small. He was like a small guy, but you could see that he was just full of power, full of influence, and a nice guy at the same time. But he was like you. He was caught up in that whole conscious movement himself, But you have to read in between the lines because he also was half gangsta kind of thing, based on his you don't mess with him. So that was one of the most exciting concerts for me to have delivered to this city. So I don't remember that interview, but I remember the feeling I had. It was like meeting a superstar, like one of the biggest superstars in the world was when I was able to talk to those guys.
So I remember a lot of females was trying to find out where the hotel was, and you were like, yeah, they're not coming to the station, and there was all these people outside the station. Did the girls ever find out what hotel they were at? Because I know people were bugging you, especially the females from back then. Do you recall that or not?
They weren't one of those groups that really were attracting the females that much. It was mostly men that were into Rakim and Eric B, so I'm surprised to hear that.
Yeah, because I recall...
Concerts, like, talk about Big Daddy Kane and people like that. Yeah. Crazy females trying to find out where the hotel room is, But no, it wasn't the case with Rakim.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to remember back specifically those things. And now, me and DRK were speaking about that specific show, because I think it was at that show, maybe him and I saw each other for the first time. Maybe not. But Kenny Crush was supposed to open for them, and what I recall is Kenny Crush performed after Eric B. and Rakim. There was something with the smoke machine, and I remember there was a fight. We jumped up on stage because somebody started attacking Isaiah, but there was a big fight, and then the fight was shut down, and then the show went on. But I recall Kenny Crush going on after Rakim, and there was an issue with the smoke screen. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't remember. What do you recall with regards to that?
Well, the only reason that Kenny Crush should have gone on after is because Kenny Crush was late for his time, and I gave him a chance to still do a show, because you don't, like, you can't put on a headline artist and then put somebody else on after. So to me, that's a little awkward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But back then we had a lot of issues with artists being on time, because, you know, it's still like, you know, we all have to learn at some point in our times not to be late for shit, right? Lateness is not really an excuse, but back then a lot of us were late, including artists. So they'd walk through the door with their 5 guests, and it'd be half an hour before their show's supposed to be on the stage. Doesn't make sense, you know?
Indeed. And
so I don't know. I don't remember all the details, but Kenny Crush and crew, I you know, even though there are beat factory artists that were next to me and I bigged them up on my song and stuff like that, I don't really know them that well.
Okay.
I don't really, like, I'm not really into their music that much. I can't really tell you what my favorite song by them is, but they were making noise. Just because I didn't doesn't mean a lot of people didn't. They're actually one of the groups that had a good opportunity to make some noise. That's why I've been signing them. You know, they had talent there.
Indeed. Now, the other thing is there's some artists, and I don't know if I'm missing from back in the days, from that era, that are still active. Thrust. And Thrust has been putting out a lot of stuff. So I remember when it was MC Thrust. And I believe his cousins was MC Wiggles and the Little Rascals. But I don't know what ever happened to MC Wiggles and the Little Rascals. But I believe that. See, when I met Thrust the first time, it was at the rap-offs in Jungle. They had these rap-offs, and that's when I first met Thrust. But I used to see him on stage at the Monster Jam and Concert Hall. And then this is a name you might remember from back in the days, J.D. Vicious.
Yeah, man. And his leather jacket. Yeah, I can see him in front of my eyes right now.
Yeah, he just put out a record. So he's still active. So, you know, other than obviously...
Under his own name, J.D. Vicious?
Under J.D. Vicious, indeed. I recently interviewed him. I believe he's in Europe. He's doing film now. I think he's in like a Star Trek movie. But he's still doing it. And he got some pretty dope stuff, man. It's the song that he put out. I'm trying to recall what the name of it is. It reminds me of Beat Street, and I'm not knocking Beat Street, but the part where he's in his room and he's playing, and it has this Caribbean vibe, and it's just, to me, it was just so reminiscent of certain times. And he's still doing this thing, you know.
That's good. He was kind of one of those rappers that didn't really sound that good back in the day. So it's good that he's putting out music now. I hope he sounds a lot different than he did back then. But he wanted it badly. He was a nice guy. Everybody liked him, and but somehow he was just off a little bit. So if he's still doing music now, putting out music now, I wish him all the luck with it, man. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Indeed. And there's 2 songs. I know I asked you about the Vision Super Sounds, the original version of Swinging with Ebony, but T.O. Vice. So Rumblin' Strong was called T.O. Vice, and there was that song. There was a demo that you played. Very famous, yeah. Rumblin' Strong. Rumblin' Strong. I don't remember what the song is called, but that song was bananas. I remember you used to play that song. The demo of that was dope. And I know there's another song that I'm trying to remember, and I can't remember who it is. Maybe it was D-Shan. D-Shan had some stuff, you know, and I believe...
Yeah, I still talk to D-Shan now and then. She's like a minister now, you know, living in the States. And she doesn't like exactly where hip-hop's going, because I asked her to come in one of my tracks, and she's like, don't really like the direction that hip hop's going right now. You know, she's a minister, so what the hell? I tried. But she was, to me, she was like one of the dopest female MCs that Toronto's ever had, and her and I don't know. She's just, like I said, her time has passed right now. I guess it's not really her anymore. But yeah, man, she was wicked.
Indeed, and I do have a record with her. She was one of the only ones that embraced me to do a record. You know, so will it ever come out? I don't know. I don't know if you remember V Vengeance, but he produced the record. So I know you know Cyclone for. I always mess up his name. 457. See, I knew him as Dizzy Diz.
457.
Yeah.
Dizzy D.
Yeah, I know him as Dizzy D or Dizzy Diz, and he didn't like when people mispronouncing his name. So I used to always, is it 457 or 457? Which one is it? And so he was kind of around at that time, and I don't mean to put it out, but I believe they dated, but I could be wrong. But
no, they not only dated, they rented a room in my house. So Deshan lived in my house. The same house where the recording studio is in the basement. DJ X is in one room, and his girlfriend Nancy is in another room, and I'm in one room, the master bedroom, and then the fourth room would be at one point Dizzy, or at one point it was Dish occupied the room, and Dizzy was the guest or whatever. So they dated for a while, yeah.
Indeed. That's going back because
I envied him because she was hot, man.
I had a big. I was in the vocal booth, and I was just like, I'm in the vocal booth with D-Shan recording. I couldn't believe it. I was just, but I was just, she was doing my man a favor to jump on the track with me, and I was just like appreciative to this day. I had messaged her the other day because they had these lists. Every so often you see these lists of rappers in Canada. So I'll put in some names sometimes that people don't know. You might see me say, well, what about Butch Lee? And people are like, huh? Right? And so I had put D-Shan, and she was appreciative of me kind of putting her name in the hat, right? When it came to certain things. So yeah, I definitely appreciate. It was one of the definitely the upper tier MCs for Toronto. So just to add is let's talk about your music, because you have a lot of things that you had a song called Rap Music that came out earlier this year, and it's been in rotation here on allthewaylivehiphop.com.
Thank you.
Before I like that song. And who was that? Bofat that produced that?
Yeah. So the story there is, I'm thinking I want to make an album. But I gotta get music because I can't produce everything. At one point, I thought I could make my own music. And OG Thrust is, like I said, I used to manage him. He was in my studio every day. One of X's best friend. His group was called KGB, so I spent a lot of time with Thrust. And he became part of X's radio show as well, which was the radio show that followed mine. So me and Thrust have always been cool. So Thrust is like, yo, Ron, you know what? I'm gonna hook you up. And next thing you know, he sends me this beat. So it was like the first time I've ever been challenged with something that wasn't mine, because I hadn't linked up with producers yet who had music. So that was my first songwriting challenge. When I played the beat for X and a couple of people, they're like, man, I don't like that beat, man. And honestly, I didn't like it that much either. It wasn't Canadian, but it still is kind of enticing to me in a way. It felt like a Western movie kind of thing. So it was during COVID, and we're all by ourselves, and I had a lot of free time, so I just kept working the song, and that was the first time I tried to sing as well. If you listen to the singing on that song, the singing is probably a little off key. But it's been, that was a long time ago to me now. Like, that was my first song, and when I sent it back to Trust was excited. Like, yo, Ron, what's this? And I had no idea it was good or if it was likable, and the lyrics had to be changed up a little bit, but based on Thrust's response and his enthusiasm, because again, I'm looking for a sign here, you know, because no one's heard me. Like, I'm in my own little world. I was inspired to rework the lyrics of the song, and we didn't know what it is, and then Bullfat calls me and he goes, Ron, I like what you've done to the song. I like what you've done to my music. So I'm like, wow, really? Cool, man. So that's why, you know, it became my first single, just out of respect for, you know, the fact that it was my beginning, and lyrically, you know, there's a whole world of music that I've written, and that's just one of the stars that you see when you look up in the sky. Like, you know, but yeah, rap music was my first song.
Indeed, and it's nice because Bofat definitely has a name, you know, worldwide, and he's affiliated with a lot of people. I know someone who's working on a whole album with him, a group that I put out. He has the song with Thrust. Thrust is on it. I can't recall the name. It was a dope track. So that's kind of where I knew the name. And, you know, I have never had the chance to meet Bofat. We just became Instagram friends, I think, yesterday, because I posted one of his records. And so, I've just heard the name over the past couple of years. And so that's dope. And then, you know, the recent track, well, no, there's another track that I had a chance to listen to, and maybe you put it out a couple months ago. I believe it's called Do What You Want.
Which one? Do What You Want?
Is it Do What You Want? And was it two other tracks that you put out? I Can't Wait and Do What You Want?
I Can't Wait's the one that Rude produced, and he did hip hop history as well. And then I Can't Wait, I kind of dropped it silently because it's not a hip hop record; it's a house record. Mm-hmm. And I think that's it. The original B-Boy Destruction is on my networks as well. You know, Spotify. So I've only released 5 songs so far, but I have an album coming out in January that's going to surprise a lot of people. It's called 40 Years Too Late. And, that's what I've been doing. Just locking myself off from the world and making music every day.
Indeed.
Every spare minute I can get, I'm either writing songs or voicing them or engineering them or mixing them or whatever, you know, like it's like a concert, and the date is in January, and that's when it happens. So I'm working this like I would work a big concert as a promoter back in the days, you know?
Indeed. So, is there a specific date that you have in January, or it's just going to be some point in January?
No, I'm not going to say anymore because I've realized that you shouldn't say dates. You know, you shouldn't commit yourself to a date because lots of things can go wrong. Initially, I wanted it to come out in September to commemorate my 60th birthday, but it wasn't ready, and I pushed it back now to January. And January is 2023, so it's also going to not only be my 60th year, but it'll be exactly 40 years since the birth of the Fantastic Voyage program, which started in 1983, and it'll also be the 50th year of hip hop. It's hip hop's birthday, so I think it makes sense for me to put it out as a 2023 release. Mm-hmm. And I will say I'm not putting out an album; I'm putting out a concept. So you'll have to wait to see what that means. I've got more in store than an album, and one of the things that kind of messed me up in a great way is when one of my producers says to me, Ron, you should get other people involved in the production now, and I'm thinking my album's done. So I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, man, you got everybody now, but you should get some other guys, like, get Chemo, for example, call Scam or whatever. So I'm like, I don't know Chemo, but I know Scam. So Chemo sent some music, and initially he sent me music I can write. I realized I can write music to anything that I feel. And then I met Scam, not personally, but I know him. Like I've actually hung with him a couple of months ago, but I didn't know Scam was like the producer that he is, because after Ruth said that and I called Scam, Concrete Mob Scam, for those who don't know.
Mm-hmm.
A nasty producer. He sends me material that is overwhelming to me because so much of it is good. I'm like, holy, like it's like a kid in a candy store, the best example. And then I start writing some new songs to that. So that is now going to delay the album even more because I'm realizing, there's a whole other feeling that comes out of Scam's music. And then Scam messes me up even more. He says, Ron, that was my old stuff. Let me send you my new stuff. So he sends me a whole bunch of other songs. And I'm like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. I got to stop. Like, but the music's so good. I had to grab a couple of tracks, man, and so to this day, I'm still fine-tuning. I ended up doing, man, I don't want to give it away, but I've been writing at the speed of light. I've written 11 songs just based on Scam's music alone, and I think Two Root said that to me less than 6 weeks ago.
Well, I could attest to Scam. Around that time when you were doing the beat battles, I was at his house. And I don't know what happened, but we never ended up doing a song, but he wanted to produce some records for me. Or some songs, not records, but songs at that time. And it would have been 92, 93. And I remember we respected each other. He's like, I didn't know you were that nice. I just remember him saying that. And it was once. And then he's like, I'm hearing all these beats. And I'm like, he's dope. So I could say he's been doing music from that time to come to find out, Concrete Mob, and even the song that he has with Faith and Concrete and my man Energy from Concrete Mob. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, that Scam produced that? I had no idea, because I don't know if he got credited for it. But to come to find out after that was Scam's production, because everyone who hears it. So yeah, definitely Scam. I think he's very underrated. Very, very underrated.
Well, I've got great producers, to be fair, in my album. They're all friggin' great, man. So I'm not trying to big up Scam more than anybody else. It was just fascinating to me that one person's music can make me write a brand new album almost. 11 songs is more than an album. So and he's got more music I refuse to touch, because otherwise I would keep going and going and going. But yeah, Two Root is probably like the teacher, the inspiration guy. He's the guy that kind of, when I said I'm making an album and called it 40 Years Too Late, initially it was an excuse to say that if you don't like my style, because I can't rap like these new rappers, then you got to, forgive me, because I should have done this when I was, 19 or 18, back in the days, but I took a different course in life. So now at age 60, you gotta put a little less pressure on me, but as I kept working and making music, Brood was one of the guys who said, Ron, it should have been 40 years too great, not 40 years too late, because you have a legacy behind you. You're entitled to do what you want and to make this music and to say what you want to say, because other people can't say what you're going to say. And don't worry about other people and their styles and stuff. Just worry about doing the best that you can possibly do with the gift and gap that you have inside of you. That's what hip-hop's all about. Just be real and don't watch people, let them watch you. So that's what I've come to believe now with a little more confidence. There's nothing like sitting on music that people haven't heard, knowing that, one day they're going to hear it. And lyrically, like I said, probably when I look at my life, I can say that it's gone through many different stages and eras, right? But one of the most intoxicating periods of my life was when I was an engineer at Apache Studios, because I got to work with a lot of different artists, because it was the only hip-hop studio where they had an engineer who could kind of make the adjustments that they needed. In Toronto, I think Beat Factory was too far for them to drive, so I had a lot of people come through my doors, and, back in those days, it cost thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to have a studio and maintain it, so it ended up being almost like a fluke that I didn't see the vision of it being a studio that would represent Toronto's hip hop scene and stuff like that. But it was a good timing kind of thing. It allowed me to be exposed to a whole culture that was very talented. But now it wasn't just me playing music on the radio. It was MCs coming into my home and spitting rhymes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all this stuff was meant to be. All this stuff was meant to be, but throughout that whole period, I've been serving other people except for myself. Throughout my whole history, this is the most selfish thing that I've done, making an album. People want me to write a book. I'm like, that's ageism, huh? Yeah, that's what people do when they retire. I'm not done. I still have my energy and my enthusiasm, and if you challenge me like that, then I'm going to do something. So making an album and not having the qualifications as an artist is an interesting thing to me, because when it comes out, it's still going to be Canadian history. It's still going to be Canadian material, and it's still going to be CanCon for radio stations to play it if they want, and it'll still go down as, maybe I'll be the oldest active rapper in Canada putting out music right now, because like I said, at age 60, most people, you don't hear them rap anymore. I don't know what the reason is for that, but you go and look, do your research, and try and find somebody as old as myself putting their hip-hop music out on Spotify or whatever, trying to put out an album, let's say, and see if they're black, and see if they're Canadian. Like, there's so many ways to break it down, but what I'm doing should be an inspiration to all the MCs out there and all the rappers who think that they have something to say and want the rest of the world to hear it. If I can do it at my age, then you can do it at your age. Absolutely. There's no excuse.
Indeed.
That's all I'm saying.
Indeed, I feel like this is a CKLN 88.1 moment, because you would say stuff like this back in the days, and you would say, and I want to see it.
Yeah, because my job was to inspire and shake things up. I've always thought Canada was a bit of a pussy place, because in America there's such a competitive element to everything that we do as black people. If you think you're the fastest runner, there's somebody next door to you who can actually run faster. But here, you can be number one and be slack. You can hesitate and still maintain your position in the market as an MC or as a rapper or as talent. So you don't have the neighbors to intimidate you who are making millions of dollars. Other than Drake, I mean, there's a few people who are rich because of it, and you think you're as talented as them, and you should be that rich, but when you're exposed to a competitive element, it makes you better at whatever it is that you do. But there's not a lot of competitive elements in Canada. Like I said, being number one is, you go to the States and there's probably somebody better than you, know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we just got to check ourselves, man. Like I said, I have a little bit of entitlement going on here because of what I've done. I've really wanted just to be selfish for one stage in my life, and that's why 40 Years Too Late is coming out in late January.
Indeed. Well, definitely looking forward to it. We're going to definitely promote it here on the whole station, not just my show. So, this is a platform. You're welcome back. It annoys me when hosts say, "You're welcome back anytime," and they don't mean it. That if I have a pet peeve in this industry, that's my pet peeve. You're welcome back anytime, and it's a phone call or a text or Righteous, I got this record, and that's just what it is. You know what I mean? I know you'll probably end up being on Turu's show, and you probably next year we'll probably do something maybe with cameras. I'm not saying nothing. Me and Turu got something planned. I can't tell you what it is, but for the 50th of the so-called 50th of hip hop, we want to do something for Canada, just because there's so much history here. Whether people could look at negative or good or bad, and people need to be recognized. Yeah, so that's basically it. I just definitely want to say you're welcome back. And when I say it, I mean it, because it just
Well, I want to come back, man, because you know the album is gonna have something to say, and I think when you hear it, you're gonna want me back.
indeed. Well,
It's a whole friggin' book to open that's never been opened before. It's like a movie, man. You're gonna want to break it down and analyze it and friggin' dissect it and figure it out. You know, I'm a complicated businessman. The way I think and the way I move is a little bit of a different nature than a lot of other people that I've encountered in doing business here in the last 40 years. So I'll have something to give if you don't know me and my potential and my history, then I really hope you at least give it a chance and listen to the album when it comes out, and then you'd be the judge in the end.
indeed. One other question. I know people want me to ask the question, so I have to ask the question. Monster Jam. I recall being at the last Monster Jam at Concert Hall. I believe Cardinal performed. There's some other people, but specifically I remember Cardinal. You did something with Monster Jam outside, so outside of Toronto, because I believe there was a Monster Jam. Was it in Kitchener-Waterloo? Did you recall doing that?
Montreal. We did one in Montreal, I think it was. I don't think I did one in Kitchener-Waterloo, but I did one in Montreal.
Okay, yeah, because someone mentioned that, because I'm in the Waterloo region, and they mentioned that you did one out here, and I recall you doing something another place, but maybe it was called.
I did that, and I don't have the flyer. Like I've kept all the flyers, so I would love to see evidence of that.
You know what? I think he has the flyer. I'm gonna try and get it for you, because there's an individual named Fraction.
That would be a hell of a surprise to me. I forgot about doing a Monster Jam in friggin' Waterloo area. That's a shock.
Indeed.
I probably did that in collaboration with some other promoters from that area, because I wouldn't have been able to poster and flyer that area myself. So it was probably somebody else who said, "Ron, can we do a Monster Jam up here?" And then we collaborated somehow.
Yeah, because he was telling me specifics, and I spoke with LA Love, and LA Love was like, that was a long time ago, right? So his recollection, because these are the foundation for this area. There's a lot of hip hop out here, and that goes
There's
back.
A lot of hip hop everywhere, man.
Oh yeah.
Think about it now. It's global now. It's like spread like an infection.
Oh, indeed. So just the founding cats out here, and they were telling me their story. So I'm trying to get the history from out here. And so, one of them was saying that he went to Monster Jam, and whoever was on stage didn't represent the area too well, and they asked to go up, and LA Love let them up. And I was just like, what? And I'm like, I know LA Love. I used to go to his house on Blake Street.
I think I remember LA Love letting on some other guys that weren't supposed to be on the show.
Indeed.
I wasn't happy about that at the time, but he snuck them in. I remember that. You know what I remember too, man? I went to Montreal for a show. I think Anthony Bond was involved in that somehow, but there's this female rapper from Boston, and I've never seen anything like it. And it's in reggae, you say a lyric and you get a forward, everyone goes bop 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 bop, and you have wheel.
Mm-hmm.
She was doing hip hop, not reggae, but I'm just trying to kind of create a scenario here. But during her show, because she wasn't much of a rapper, but she was trying. But she would get her applause because she would open up the jacket that she was wearing and expose her naked breast. So she kept flashing the crowd during the performance. Were you there by any chance?
No, this was where? In Montreal or Toronto?
In Montreal. But
Nah.
The girl was from Boston. That's why I thought of Montreal as to where I did that other Monster Jam, because she was a live performer. And I don't know why else she would have been on the stage unless she was booked to be on the stage. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I wasn't at it. The only Monster Jam I was at would have been just in Toronto, and the last one I recall, it was either the one at Concert Hall with Cardinal Official, and that would have been maybe 96.
91, I think it was.
Was it 99? I thought it was. I remember.
I can see the flyer in front of me right now.
Okay.
maybe I'm wrong with the date, but that was when you look at that flyer. There's so much history in there when you see the talent that was scheduled to perform that night. It was an irony. I don't know how I was able to get all those people to perform in one night, man. I should have had my flyers out during this interview. Then I could have been a little more accurate. You know?
No, it's all good. Because I don't know if Danny O was at that show, but I was at York with Cardinal and Danny O in the 90s. We had one class together, the Oppressed Americas, and so this is before they were big. I guess this is when they started doing the stuff with Beat Factory and coming out. So I don't recall the dates. I just recall that I just specifically remember Cardinal at the concert hall, and that was it. And there was another place, and maybe that was 94. It was supposed to be at like some bowl place, and something happened. Maybe they didn't want hip hop there, and I don't know if you moved it to Spectrum or where you had to move it. But that was like around one of the last Monster Jams that I recall, and I can't remember who was going to be on that bill.
Well, I don't think anyone could ever put together a show like that again, not with that quality of talent. But it's good for the time, man. You know, it wasn't about money. I don't remember if I paid those artists more than a couple $100 each at the most, you know. And, it was cool.
Indeed. And
you know, I can't remember everything I've done because I did so much, man. I have this calendar, and I look back at it the other day, and I was busy like 4 nights a week playing out, not just serving the hip-hop concerts, but in between I was playing at high schools and junior high schools and banquet halls and community centers. And a lot of people kind of forgot the impact that I made as DJ Ron Nelson, but I was also not only the promoter of the concert hall, but I was the DJ playing the music.
Indeed.
Before the artist went on or after, or, having to keep the vibe going. So it's like, today you would never see that, one man can't do it all, but back then I kind of had no choice, I didn't have a proper team. That was something that just would come in time maybe, but in the beginning, it's like one man.
And you had to do the show, and you had to do the radio show. Plus, you would interview them when they came to the city, right? So,
Imagine having to do the radio show and then having to be organized for the concert hall just for a few hours after the radio show's done, and you got to drive up and down and worry about, whether the flights have come in on time and whether the guy has picked them up from the airport and whether they can drive them to the radio show before it ends, and if not, then they call in all this crap. I mean, it was a lot of stuff to handle at the same time, and that's why when I look back at it now, it was pretty chancy. And a lot of money being gambled at the same time because not every show made money. So, if you keep doing it, then you got to kind of just keep living the life. You do it because you love it.
Indeed.
You want to be consistent.
Gray hairs. And I almost forgot because I don't know how I forgot to ask the question. But before, because there's so many stuff, this is the question I had to ask. My favorite interview. All I'm going to say is this. Ivan the Munchkin.
Ivan the Munchkin.
The KRS-One Just Ice interview.
Tell me about it. What happened?
So basically, what happened in it, and if I could get a copy, if someone has a copy, basically you were like, okay, y'all have to behave yourself, no swearing, and then Just Ice is like, what the fuck you mean no swearing? And it was just the most hilarious interview. It was just funny. It had everybody who I knew who was at home listening to the show hype. And I think Just Ice was throwing out $21 bills that night at Concert Hall for the show. And Rumble ended up sampling it for his diss to Beat Factory. And he sampled Ivan, where Just Ice goes, Ivan the Munchkin reminded me of my Puerto Rican homeboy named Jose. And he kind of went over Jimmy. But it was the J, the O, the S, the E. It's Ivan.
Really?
I don't know if you recall that.
Those are great memories, man. I did not even know that happened.
Yeah,
no idea.
And so that was the highlight of the interview. And then I guess when Rumble left to go to the UK, he parted with his little diss to to Ivan, and he used that interview. But that was like a classic interview, and yeah, I that was my most memorable interview, and how you handle yourself through it. And it was just fun because you was kicking back because you were already affiliated with KRS-One, and maybe Just Ice kind of, that was the tour that he was affiliated with KRS-One after the fact, and this was after Scott LaRock had passed, right? So that you know, when you ask people about that, they're gonna tell you about that interview. But that was my favorite interview, other than the Rakim interview. And you know, Rakim, you know, him and I, same culture, so he was definitely an influence for me. But those are the two. And the Public Enemy, I had a chance to listen to it. I think we was at I don't know what record store. If it was Star Sound. What was the record store that was on the second floor before Play the Record?
Carnival.
Carnival. I think we were in Carnival. It was either Carnival or Star Sound, and we asked them to tune into 88.1 because we couldn't get in.
Star Sound was never on the second floor.
No. Star Sound was on the first floor, but I couldn't remember Carnival. Carnival was on the second floor, and it closed down, and then later on, Play the Record came into the picture, from what I recall, right? And I think Carnival Record, it was New York Connection, was also there.
Yeah,
I don't know if it became
all about that store.
Yeah, you know, that
Short lifespan.
that was like after the fact, but that's what I recall from back then. So yeah.
Somebody said Just Ice passed away, but I did some research and I didn't find that to be true. Do you have any information on that?
Not that I'm aware of, unless
Yeah,
it's.
it would have been fucking commercial news if he did. So now
Yeah.
just didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, I don't recall. And your show was, you know, news, because obviously with Scott LaRock passing, I recall when you said it, and it was the biggest news ever. And the other thing is 50 Cent, the original 50 Cent. You the one who brought that news. They're like, well, there was an individual named 50 Cent who was on the back of Rakim, Eric B. and Rakim, and he passed away, and was like, what? Right? And never knew who that 50 Cent was, but you brought that news to everybody in Toronto.
Well, you got a good memory, G. I can't remember every 3-hour slot I did on that show, so it's good to hear these stories.
It's a lot of years ago, and
Pick yourself up.
you know, it's a lot of individuals who are my age, their childhood. Like, you're the big brother. You know what I mean? I mean, you got 10 years on me, but we looked up to you, and you know, anything that you was doing, we wanted to be there because we loved hip hop. And you know,
Little did I know.
a New York cat coming to Toronto, I kind of got looked at a little bit different because I was always the outsider. But part of it that was cool, I was able to go to every neighborhood. So I was in Jungle, I was in Regent, I was in Jane and Finch, I was in Flemo, and I was accepted there. I remember one time I was in Jungle and they were coming to jump me, and they're like, oh, it's you, Lyrical, right? And it was because I was known as a rapper, right? And I was always good with everybody. So I got to go, and I was a downtown cat. I never lived into none of the, you know, the, I guess, projects, co-op or whatever. So for me, I got a different perspective, and sometimes it hurt, sometimes it didn't, right? Just because I was an outsider. So in that sense, but it was my connection to New York, because I wasn't, you know, unless it was the summertime or, you know, anything that I missed, it was because I was in New York. So sometimes you wouldn't see me because and it was like that Public Enemy. I was like, do I go to New York and then to JA, you know, for a couple weeks, or do I go to Public Enemy? I'm going to Public Enemy, right? But, you know, maybe I think it was, I don't know who it was that I missed. There were some concerts I missed. Maybe it was an LL Cool J concert, but I had a chance to see him. No, I was at the special ed. That was, I think, Boxing Day as well. That was on a Boxing Day as well. I recall that. And I think I took the bus to New York the day after I jumped on, and it was snowing. It was, I don't know if it was a blizzard, but it was a lot of snow, I recall. And
yeah, man, you fucking remember it. You got other people doing research for you, obviously, right?
Nah.
Or you just talk to people, man.
This is me being there. Put it like this. I had a chance to speak to UMCs, And I remember there was an incident, but I was, still like a fly on the wall with Chub Rock and what's those dudes who smoke weed? Cypress Hill. And I think Chub Rock was mad because he thought that he was good. Everyone was opening for him, but you put Cypress Hill on last, and Chub Rock was mad. I just remember him being mad. I don't, remember what the argument was, but I just remember that happening. But yeah, this is not. I've really haven't done much research for this because it was stuff that I lived. There's certain points that I wrote down to ask you certain questions, but other than that, these are things that I specifically remember. So yeah.
Cool, man.
So I won't speak about Nice and Smooth though. I'll leave that alone unless you want to speak about it. I never knew what happened at the hotel, but I'm gonna just leave it at that. So Nice and Smooth, you owe Ron Nelson money. That's all I'm saying. I'm gonna just leave it at that.
Yeah, those guys trying to get a gun into the country, and the manager, I believe, was sent back. So they came in one man short, but probably it was a license gun, or else they would have arrested him somehow. That's what threw me off about that whole Nice and Smooth thing. That's what I remember from it.
Yeah. So
it wasn't a good memory. But they were dope MCs, though, man. Like that was a good time. The music was a little transitional at that time, but the music was dope. I was excited for that concert.
Now, was there someone who you wanted to bring that you never got the chance to bring that you really wanted, that out of all of the shows that you brought, who was it that maybe that you wanted to bring?
LL Cool J. Look, Astrolite burnt down. I had him booked.
Oh, I remember that.
Great artist.
I forgot about that.
Was supposed to be on that show. Like that would have been my biggest concert. And when I think back, the blessing was the concert venue was too small. Astrolite seemed a lot bigger than what it was, but that place burnt down, and as a result, I never be credited with bringing one of the greatest artists to this city. Other people did, and I didn't bring Biggie. Sunshine brought Biggie.
Tony, yeah, I remember Tony D brought Biggie. That's right. Yeah.
And hardly anybody knew about it because Tony didn't promote it the way that I would have promoted it. So he never really got the proper credit for doing one of the most, historically significant artists in our city.
Indeed. Well, I could say out of one of your, I would say pupils, I helped bring one of the biggest concerts, Wu-Tang Clan, the very first time, the only time all members came to Toronto. It was me and my cousins, Big Apples, but I won't speak about Big Apples too much. I'm gonna just leave it at that. But I funded half the concert, so
Okay. My phone is ringing now, so I gotta go.
But yeah, so with that, I'm gonna let you go. But I want to say one thing. Thank you for coming through. Much appreciated. The last thing I want to say, it's your day here on All The Way Live, hiphop.com. The Administrator presents. What Ron Nelson track are we gonna get into to start off this set?
Man, you telling me to choose a track?
Indeed.
All right, well, you got to play We Made Hip Hop History then, because I guess that puts things in context of my unselfish nature, because I'm basically bigging up the people in my life who were the pioneers who helped me move and shake this whole movement, because I didn't do it by myself, like all these people were on the front lines in some way, shape, or form, and I'm paying tribute to them, and I'm paying tribute to Canada. Because I'm a patriot, I'm always defending Canada, always looking out for Canadian point of view. So, yeah, man, play that shit. We made hip-hop history. Too Rude, the legendary producer, is behind the music on this track. And, it's Canadian, 100%.
Indeed. So we're going to go into it right now. Thank you very much, DJ Ron Nelson, Mixmaster Ron Nelson, Big Brother Ron Nelson. We Made Hip-Hop History featuring Too Rude. Stay in tune because we do it here because the mainstream just ain't doing it. Peace.
One love.